Please welcome Arseny Kapulin.
Hello. How are you guys doing? Was lunch good? Everybody's happy? All right. So the plan for today is I'm going to be joined on stage with three amazing developers, and we're going to talk about various topics that come up often in development of complex Roblox experiences, mostly things that have to do with like engineering, programming using Roblox APIs, and just sort of how do they solve hard problems. We are going to have a Q&A at the end. So while we are discussing other things, sort of come up with interesting questions to ask the panel. And with that, I want to welcome on stage Trey Reynolds from Stylus Studios. All right, Trey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and how are you?
Pretty good. So can you tell us sort of what are you working on these days?
Well, I'm known for Phantom Forces, but these days, that's kind of old news, and so now we're working on a remake of Call of ROBLOXia, but now it's called Core Phi, and we're really kind of going hard with animation, and we have custom physics, and we have like a wholly server authoritative like client-server model, and so this is basically where my mind's been for the past 3 years.
All right, awesome. We will talk about that. Now, Stephen Leitnik from Easy Games. All right, Stephen, good to have you here. What have you been up to?
Yeah, so I've been working at Easy Games, and that's been great. But on the side, a lot of you probably know me for open source projects such as Knit and data store editor plugin and things of that nature. So keeping on with that stuff.
All right. And last but not least, Joshua Marthiz. How is it going?
It's going well, yeah.
What are you working on? Specific games these days, or?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm working with Nocturne Entertainment on a new game, and one of my own games, which is the first for a couple of years because I've been working on events for quite a while, like Bloxy Awards in 2021 and the Egg on 2018. So yeah.
All right, awesome. So we have a few topics that we thought would be fun to talk about. We are not going to get through all of them. So we'll sort of just see how the discussion goes. But I wanted to start and talk a little bit about, so Trey, you brought up sort of server authority and things like this. There's this interesting, so Roblox as a platform obviously gives developers a lot of freedom. So like you can run code on the client side, you can run code on the server side. We used to just replicate things from the client to the server. Now, thankfully, we don't. But you, of course, have remote events, right? And so technically, you could implement anything on the client and then just have the server blindly trust results. And I heard our cheat detection system is basically flawless now, so you will never have any problems with this approach. Is that true? How you guys are handling, because do you do a lot of computations on the server, or do you do a lot of stuff on the client? Like, how does it work for the games that you guys are working on?
So I guess first, a 5-second anecdote. I literally have a comment in the Phantom Forces source code where I said, like, screw security, and then I proceeded to write a bunch of like horribly insecure code. And that was like back in 2015, and Roblox was handling security really well up until about that point, and then we've been paying for it ever since. So like, it's hard. It's a constant battle between the devs and hackers. Sorry, one more time. So
for example, Phantom Forces, right? So there's a shooter, and the main mechanic is I point a gun at somebody and press the left mouse button. Is the client saying, oh, hey, this person definitively shot this other person, please deduct the damage to the server, or what's going on there?
So that is kind of what's going on there, at least it was in the beginning. And then we've like slowly been moving damage calculation to the server, and like, okay, well, what gun is the user using? Okay, well, we know the server knows what gun the user is using. And then like, okay, well, what body part did they hit? Well, like we know that like if you're standing behind a wall and I say that I shot you or whatever, then like the server can tell, like, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. And so we've been slowly moving like code from the client to the server. But this also like is not very good, because now whenever you want to write a feature, like maybe we want to make an ammo box that you can throw it on the ground or whatever, you have to like write the feature and make sure it's working and make sure it's fun. And then you have to write it a second time and think about every entry point that like a hacker could use to like, maybe they throw one ammo box, maybe they throw a million, maybe they throw -1, right? Like, and maybe they throw it at infinity and then it ruins the whole game for some reason. And like, this is not good, right? Because your goal becomes not like, how do I make a fun game? It's like, how do I secure the game? And so like using this idea, there's like an idea called server authoritative architecture, which is where you basically, you move all the code off of the client onto the server, and the client becomes a simulator for what it expects your state to be on the server. So for example, like you are a client, you have your computer, you're generating inputs. You're moving your mouse, you're pressing buttons, you're rendering new frames, right? Each frame is a new input to the system. And like, so what you end up doing is you create a copy of the client state on the server, and you, as long as you send the same inputs in the same order to both the server and the client, and you start out with the same starting state, you can expect to reasonably be at the same final state after all this. And so this like can massively simplify your like programming experience, as long as you like deal with all the nuances and whatever, and there's like a lot of hidden complexity, but like, you know, whatever, that's with every system. But then you only have to program a feature once, and it like opens up the world.
Yeah, that makes sense. It probably doesn't help with Phantom Forces, and I guess your new game is like highly competitive, right? So it's like really important that you get this right. Steven, what about the games that you've been working on? I'm hoping that somebody here tells me simpler, more like, oh hey, things are not actually that bad for the stuff that I'm working on, because
yeah. I mean, Roblox has obviously done a lot of work to combat a lot of the exploits, which has been amazing, and that's been amazing. But obviously, it's an ongoing battle no matter what you're doing. You're always going to be having to write code to kind of help prevent other exploits and whatnot. I mean, I think kind of what Trey was saying too, it has been really important for us, which is, I mean, kind of the whole notion that you just don't trust the client. But you want the client to have a good experience still. And so kind of what you're getting at is the whole idea of like client prediction. And I think that's so key to making an experience feel really good and fluid, is making sure that you nail down the idea that like the client feels what they're doing is instantaneous. At the same time, making sure the server has a final say as to what happens. And if that means that the client mispredicts something and it doesn't happen, then that's kind of the penalty that happens, and that's fine. But yeah, that's, I think, a big focus of ours, is making sure we still have the authority on the server, but the client feels like it's in control.
I have a general question about this, but we'll come back to this. Joshua, what about the games that you're working on?
Yeah, so some of the games I'm working on is not quite as like intense with like super quick. Like you'll notice in an FPS game if you're shooting. So what we often do is, again, server has a total authority, but to save on replication, we replicate through attributes. So the client knows, okay, this is enabled or disabled, and it knows the animation that should be playing or something, and the server will just flip the attribute. But this also, like with predictive, we can then say, so the client will say, okay, I want to do this thing and expect the state to be enabled and can start that already. So even by the time the server gets it and sends it back, it's already predicted. And if the server actually says no, well, we can just revert. And if the client wants to mess up their own experience by hacking or whatever, they can just have fun with that, but it doesn't really mess up anyone else.
This actually comes to the question that I wanted to ask. So you do client-side prediction, right? Client-side prediction, my understanding, is essentially what all of you guys are doing is you're doing some local modifications to the data model state that are very visibly affecting what the client sees, right? So maybe you do that, maybe there's like a damage indicator, or maybe there's some UI, or maybe I don't know, maybe you start the death animation for the character, like something complicated is happening, right? The challenge, of course, is that rolling back some of this stuff might be difficult, and the bad failure case of this, one of the bad failure cases of this is you sort of forget to roll back, and there's some permanent modifications now that are just going to be there, so you have sort of a permanent desync from what the client sees and what the server actually thinks. the more code you write to do client-side prediction, the more difficult it feels to sort of make sure this doesn't happen. Do you guys have like frameworks, approaches, like some systems built so that this doesn't happen? And also, how do you test this stuff? Because some of these things, right, they would only happen under cases where maybe you have latency, maybe actually many people are actually actively playing the game, so it feels difficult to replicate some of these failure cases.
So we have basically the entire client state as far as what is synced between the server and the client. We have it all in just one table, and we actually rebuild the entire world every frame. And like, so we know what the map is, we know what the lighting is, we know what the, where all the character models are. And so like, you can do a lot of, like this sounds very expensive, but you can do a lot of optimizations and say, okay, well the map hasn't changed since the last frame and whatever. And like, but the character model has and like whatever. And so this ensures that if the state changes, there's no events that need to be fired. We just pull the state again every frame and we just rebuild the world however it needs to look. And so rollback is essentially it's thought-free, like we don't have to reason about the system, but certainly like you have to be careful about the way you actually go about implementing this.
So this is interesting. This sounds a little bit like what React-based UIs do, where you have some sort of virtual representation of the state of the world, and then you never actually like modify it directly, so to speak. Like you always have the snapshot, right, from the earlier stage, and then you have some function that efficiently changes the whole data model on the client, but it just caches like a whole lot so that if something doesn't change, you actually don't have to rebuild it.
Right. So this is how this works, and also, as far as resyncing is concerned, like this is like most of the complexity of any system. We just like you have to make sure that if the client desyncs from the server, that the server knows this, can be able to serialize the entire client state and send it to the client, and then like this will be out of date. So there will be missing inputs, and then once the client receives the like the old state, it needs to resimulate all the inputs since the state was created to get, to catch up back where it was. So like there's a lot of nuances, but anyway, yeah, we do have like a DOM.
I'm guessing this is why you guys have like your own physics simulator and stuff.
Yeah, but you don't have to do it.
Yeah, right.
Like the more server authoritative stuff you have, the better, but like it doesn't have to all be server authoritative.
There is some balance. What about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very similar to that in terms of the whole idea that you need to be able to reconcile a state. So the server has an idea of what it should be at, but the client by that point has already gone ahead. And so at that point, you need some way for the client to sync up with what the server now says is true, but then you're all behind and everything. So you gotta, the server sends back to the client what it thinks it should be at, and then it has to replay everything to make sure it's back up. So I mean, personally, I don't have any frameworks or anything like that dealing with this sort of stuff yet. I think for a lot of Roblox devs, it has been kind of a new environment to kind of find ourselves in and learn. And so I've been doing a lot of reading on it and seeing what other people do, but personally, I don't have anything at the moment.
Yeah, and just to hop on the testing side, I think like for us, it's useful to like test on lower end devices with less memory, etc., but also to have a wide pool of testers. So we'll test on like a bunch of people will be in the UK and test with someone where their ping is like 200. And things like this with like a lot of testers who try things you'll never think of, that really helps it to cache some things.
That's interesting. I do wonder, for UI, right, there's like now React and stuff like this. It's almost like there's an opportunity at some point in the future for somebody to try to build some sort of generic like reconciliation data model thingy that like helps with this. One final thing I wanted to quickly ask about the exploits. Do you guys usually deal with the platform-wide stuff, like, oh, somebody figured out how to speed hack and that affects every Roblox game? Or is it like, okay, I'm gonna be dedicated and figure out how to be the best at Phantom Forces by virtue of an exploit instead of by actually getting good at the game? And so you're sort of dealing with a very targeted attack on your specific game that has your specific remotes in mind and like works with them.
Oh, we are very targeted. Oh, yes. at this point, like everything that we can secure is basically locked down, but there's a lot of wiggle room for people to get around. Like, I don't know. Yeah, we were very targeted. So anyway, next.
Same. I mean, I can't speak on behalf of the whole Bed Wars team myself, but I work with them, and I've heard a lot from them how they have whole communities dedicated to trying to cheat, and having to have our own dedicated team to help prevent that. So a lot of work is going into that all the time.
Yeah, thankfully the games I work on haven't really been that competitive, so we don't have so many targeted people. But yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. It feels like way back, right, when like filtering enabled didn't exist and stuff like this. I think almost the only thing we saw was platform-wide stuff, and now there's still some platform-wide. But I feel like maybe one big next step from the Roblox perspective is a lot of the stuff that you guys are talking about, it like makes sense, but it's also difficult to build up from scratch, right? And it's difficult to make sure it works and things like this. And we give relatively little control as a platform in terms of, oh, I want like a custom detection logic for X or custom reconciliation, or like, can I roll back physics and stuff like this? And so a lot of the stuff is difficult to solve in a generic manner, but I feel like essentially the battle has moved from, oh, there's like a ton of platform-wide stuff to like, okay, great, phantom forces, you know? Yeah. Switching gears a little bit, I wanted to ask you guys about the other network-related topic, which is streaming. Do any of you guys use streaming in your game?
Yeah, we use streaming, and even just kind of handling when players are on lower devices. So we use like a lot of collection service tags, atomic bindings, which if you don't know what that is, it's basically waits for an instance to be added on collection service, but also waits for specific descendants to be added. So you don't have to wait for child, and you know something's only going to run code when it's all ready. So we use lots of things like that. And then again, with the attribute state set by the server, if something's added, the server would have already set if it's enabled or disabled or any stats, and then you can just load it into the state it needs to be. So that's kind of how we do it. And really low is on like part replication. It's just added and then an attribute or two.
Did you start from streaming in your game in general, and did you start with this system in mind, or is it something that you had to like retrofit later after you started kind of figuring out how to work in this environment?
Yeah, so on this specific game, I joined the team after they'd started, but they've got a previous game, and performance is really a thing because it's like a big world and a ton of stuff loading in. So it was kind of something they thought of like from the start, like this is important. So.
No love for streaming from the rest of the panel?
No, on my own personal project, yes. I think one thing I've learned, I think as an engineer, it's very easy to want to over-engineer everything and take control of everything. One thing I will give Roblox a lot of credit for is usually we don't have to. So I think streaming enabled is a good example of that, where it has just improved so much over the years that if I want to build a massive world and I want people of all devices of whatever memory they have, whatever capabilities they have, I don't really have to worry about that anymore and write my own LOD systems or anything. I can just click a checkbox and let the system handle it, and it has done wonders. So yeah, it's much better in today's state, and I really appreciate that.
I'm wondering, actually, I should know this. I forget if like atomicity for models is generally available now, but like anybody used it? Because I know essentially streaming for a while was in the state where there was like zero developer controls, right? Which I think is good as a forcing function on us, because it really forces us to make sure that it's as good as it can be. At the same time, it doesn't actually fully work, because you have to be able to say like this thing is persistent, this thing is atomic, stuff like this. I don't know if you guys had a chance to like play with any of this.
It's good. Someday we will use streaming. Someday it will be good enough.
I think there's like other. I remember I think we had discussion with Phantom Forces team like a while back. And, like I think in some of these cases there is difficult gameplay sort of restrictions. Like if you have a sniper rifle and you're expecting to be able to snipe somebody from one end of the map to the other one, then the whole concept of streaming starts to break down a little bit.
You can have multiple focus points.
Right,
you can have,
right.
You know, whatever.
Yeah. There's complexities involved in this. Cool. One general topic I wanted to also talk about is sort of performance, right? And obviously super important to many developers on the platform. There are sort of two things I wanted to ask. One is, what tools do you use to look at performance? For example, microprofiler, script profiler, do you have custom timing system and stuff? And do you do this analysis like, oh, the game is slow, let me pull up some tools and look at this? Or do you have some sort of analytics reporting where you're like, okay, let's just, we have like a system and the system should take X milliseconds and we'll report this to our backend and like look at this, like, is any of that stuff going on?
So people certainly say that early optimization is the root of all evil. But like we still fall into this camp anyway.
Attributed to Donald Knuth.
Yeah. So if I'm in game, I probably also am checking out the microprofiler. Like it is just cool to see, but also if you have not used the microprofiler before, you can open it up by doing Control F6 while in game, and do Control P to pause, and you can like go through the individual frames, and you can actually like use this profiler to profile your own stuff too. So like you can do debug before like a code block that you think might be slow. You can do debug.profile begin and give a little string tag like, oh, this is the shooting code or the rendering code. And then at the end of the code, you say debug.profile end, and then you'll be able to see it as a tag, as like a line segment in the microprofiler, along with like what the average frame time is, how many calls there are per frame, like, you know, how much time that specific call took. And this is like extraordinarily useful. And you can also do there are other features where you can like click on several of them, and then it'll come up with a thing in the bottom right that shows you real-time analytics whenever you unpause. It's like a wonderful tool. But yeah, we do it all the time.
And then what about the others?
Yeah, I agree. We do it all the time. And like, you know, I wouldn't call it a micro-optimization to look at the microprofiler.
Right.
No, I think
it's good to just keep it in mind.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
I think it's so important that you're looking at the profiler often and early and making sure that like, are there hotspots that show up early? And if there are, let's address those before they, you know, snowball into bigger issues down the line that are harder to fix. So yeah.
Yeah, we also look at like the memory usage, especially after we do an update. Before we publish anything, we'll take a look back and see, okay, is everything as it should be? And yeah, we catch some things there sometimes.
Is this a manual process as well?
Yeah, so we'll actually go in and take a look and compare it to last time and stuff like that.
How much do you guys do this? So it makes sense to do all of this when you're developing a game. One big issue might be that you guys probably all have pretty good rigs, and there's like a really good graphics card in it, and like a 16-core CPU and whatever, and like 32 gigabytes of memory. But then you look on the sad little mobile device, and it's slow and unbearable. And like, how often, to what extent do you profile as you develop versus like testing on some particularly terrible device?
I've always got an old phone on me, and an old Android tablet. Basically get a $80 device off of Amazon if you can, and use that. I think that's been so critical to find those hotspots faster, making sure that your bases are covered. So.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Did any of you have a chance to use the new script profiler?
Not yet.
No, I haven't.
So I'm going to use this. We launched it. I'm going to use the fact that I'm on the stage to do a little promotion of the new feature. We shipped it like in December, I think, last year. A lot of people still don't know it exists because I think microprofiler has been out for like years and years and years and years. So like it makes sense as a go-to tool. We shipped script profiler, which essentially gives you, it's a different kind of tool. Like it doesn't replace microprofiler. You should use both. But it gives you an easier way to do without having to do manual annotations and stuff. It just tells you, okay, like during the duration of your capture, which is like, I don't know, you capture 10 seconds of the game, like this script code took like X seconds out of this, and these are the call stacks that are expensive, and this function took X. and et cetera, et cetera. We are actively improving some of the stuff in this, but like it's usable as part of Dev Console today. So hopefully that can help. Any of you guys started using the new analytics that we shipped in terms of like the memory on the server and stuff like this? Has that been helpful?
I love them. They're great. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right. That is good. We are closing, we're approaching the 10-minute mark to the end of the session, which is when we are going to take Q&A. I'm going to ask one final question to the panel about the feature that's near and dear to my heart, but please queue up. I think we have 2 microphones in the aisles, and you can ask any questions to anybody on the stage about anything you want. But one final question is, did you guys see the native code beta? Are you excited about this?
Oh, yes. Some of our code has seen like a 6x improvement in performance, and like others like 4x. It's like my favorite feature of the year, probably.
I've seen it. I haven't got a chance to use it yet, but I'm very excited to play around with it and see what we can get from it.
Yeah, I think I've used it a little bit, but not as like just before I came. So.
All right. All right. Do we have people at one of the mics and not the other mic, which is great. Because we won't have to alternate. All right, so please say your name or Roblox handle or whatever suits you, and ask your question.
Hi, my name is James. My username is Quinty. The question I have is around memory and performance. So a lot of times we're talking about CPU usage, and that's always a constraint. But another constraint we've ran into on low-end devices is memory. And this affects not just like what you're programming, but also like artistic style, even maybe the gameplay you're designing. Because if you have a ton of guns in a game, each one's going to use some memory, and then maybe you want to like reduce that. How do you profile, balance, and think about memory usage on Roblox like that?
So I think in the wide case, like streaming is your friend. Like we don't use it, right? But like no, it really is. Like streaming is wonderful. As far as like you can do custom LODs as well. So like maybe character models use so we use low polygons for our character models, and that really keeps memory usage down. Like we currently have some problems with module scripts taking up too much memory. Like our Lua heap is like 200 megabytes, but we're like working on getting that down as well. And then like another thing is that if you have like a lot of state that's held in the heap, then like a lot of the time it's just because you have like a bunch of Lua tables of Lua tables of Lua tables. And in many cases, if you have like a big array of a bunch of tables, like you can transpose this data. So maybe you can have a time list, a position list, a velocity list, or whatever. And this actually like defragments your memory, and it makes like it's really good for the CPU cache and like everything. I don't think that answers the entire question, but like there's more people to answer. So
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I think we kind of take a approach from the start of like making sure we reuse a lot of meshes, reuse a lot of textures, lower res textures. I think if we just went and tried to like optimize at the end, it wouldn't really work. So we're trying to work from the start with all the artists and the meshes and everything straight through.
Yeah, same. I think taking advantage of like GPU instancing and whatnot has been helpful, making sure, at least at the GPU memory level, that's been helpful. So.
All right, thank you.
So my name is Sigmatech on Roblox. I work for Softwares Interactive. I have a question about microprofiler because we often see spikes in the microprofiler, and we'd like to diagnose and see what's really wrong with our experience. But oftentimes we go into the microprofiler, we see something, but we're not really sure what the labels mean. I'd like to know, like maybe I just am not aware. But are there more resources to understand what's going on in microprofiler? And in addition, specifically really troubleshoot, problem areas. Because like sometimes, debug labeling things doesn't, we can't search it in the microprofiler as well. So it makes it really hard to use it. But we really love to use microprofiler to,
That's probably a question more for me. So we have had cases in the past where file a bug report on dev forum where you're like, this profile makes no sense. What the heck does this label mean, and what is even going on there? Because I think a lot of the stuff is like annotations inside the engine. We have had many cases where we either looked at the profiler, we meaning the Roblox engineering team, or somebody posted a profile on that forum, and we changed some markers, renamed something, added some information. Unfortunately, a lot of this isn't really documented because it's also in flux. Like, oh, the physics engine implementation has changed. Now some of the markers that used to make sense don't really make sense. But I don't know if you guys know, maybe there's like some community, I know some community members have had sort of these informal like tutorials, something like this posted on the profiler. I don't know if you can recommend anything like this around this.
I think Mullet's Gavin made like a little like cheat sheet, but it's like sometimes like incomplete on some things. But
Yeah, I'll often just search the dev forum for the tag and see if anybody else has asked. And
Yes.
yeah.
all right, well, oh, and I guess I just you know, being able to like search for our tags is, you know, it would be super powerful for, you know, our diagnostics and whatnot.
Yeah, that makes sense. I forget if there's like an HTML version, but maybe it doesn't have search as well. So I think both of these essentially would be file a feature request in dev forum or file bug reports or feature request in dev forum when you find specific tags that are just nonsensical. Like, for example, one thing that at some point we ran into is when you are doing collision detection. At some point there was just like a tag there that just said like collision detection or whatever. But now it should have how many parts does it have to resolve? How many collision points does it have? And then sometimes you can resolve this by saying, oh, okay, there's like only a few parts colliding, but for example, there's a ton of contact points. And this can happen when there's a complex mesh like embedded inside another complex mesh. So we are trying to add more information when requested, but without the request, nothing will change. So yeah, I think this is just something to interact with through the forum feature requests, cool. Bug reports.
Yeah, I'll submit that.
Right, thank you. All right.
Hello, I go by Noble_Draconian on the platform. And I had a question about sort of systems that the client needs to have like almost full authority over, and sort of how you sort of counteract exploits with that. For example, if you have a game where a player can throw an axe or throw a dodgeball, or you have moving platforms but they're done on the client because, you know, you want that smooth physics and no latency. How do you sort of counteract like exploits for that, because it is mostly client authoritative?
You actually don't have to have really anything on the client. The only thing you need to trust is like how often it's rendering a new frame, and like mouse and keyboard and like touchscreen inputs and whatever. Though like touchscreen inputs maybe is like, don't do that. But as far as, yeah, no, I think the reality is anything that the client has authority over, you have to like just work really hard to constrain what is a reasonable input on the server. Like, you know, you throw an axe from here, well, maybe the client claims that like the axe got thrown from the light over there or whatever. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's not within a reasonable radius of the character. Throw it out, right? And maybe give them the axe back or something. You know, like be nice about it. And that's like really all you can do. You just have to lock it down as much as you can.
I think alternatively too, I think that's a great approach too. If you have the resources, and you know, some people might disagree with me on this, but if you are doing something as simple as like an axe throw, you can probably calculate that all, you know, parabolic curve or whatever, and just simulate it immediately on the client, and then do the same thing on the server, make sure they all line up within some margin of error, and still trust the server and still have the client look silky smooth. So.
And you could probably even do some ping calculations and like relatively, okay, how fast can they move if they run? What ping do they have? And then you have like a delta for like how much you can adjust for any corrections.
So some sort of like heuristic on the server, right, where you observe the data that the client is telling you that they think happen, and then like have margins of error, but then at some point you say this is unrealistic within the parameters of the physics of what I think should happen, so like don't do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, so I'm L2000. I'm wondering, like, do you do any unit and integration testing? And if you do, like, what kind of tools do you use for that?
Was it unit and integration?
Unit and integration.
Okay,
testing, yeah.
so unit and integration testing is like something that is more helpful for larger studios. And a large studio, we are not, so.
I use it for utility modules, unit testing specifically, and very little. Mostly things are self-tested across the board, and with games especially, I think it's almost more valuable just to have some people that can play test rather than writing a bunch of code that's going to break because you change a feature next week. So.
Yeah, I'd agree. I don't really work in large teams at the moment, so yeah.
I'm going to ask a related thing. Do you guys have dedicated people on the team who mostly playtest? Or do you do a lot of playtest? Like every single person who's working on the game is doing the shared amount of sort of playtest?
Yeah, we spend like half our time working on the game and half the time like playtesting the game. So that seems like the good split.
Absolutely. That and getting community involved. Try to do some early
like following people around who have complaints and like making tweaks and say, please rejoin the game, like, and tell us like if this made your performance better or whatever.
Yeah,
all right.
Same for me.
All right, we're going to answer one last question. I'm sorry, there's 2 people on the line, but we are out of time, and we are all at RDC the remainder of the day. So if you can find us in the crowd, then we can talk more.
All right. So hello, I'm Dan, and what I want to talk about is a bit orthogonal. So developer experience is really important when considering all of these optimizations. We've all heard the common advice about using maids and binders, but what's your most niche tip for keeping your developers sane while you're optimizing your programs?
I would say organization is key. You know, apart from all the modules and things and patterns that you use, making sure that your team has a good and concise plan for how you're going to lay out the structure of your code projects. I think that goes a long way to make sure people stay a little bit sane at least.
Yeah, I am also building on that. Like, I also like keeping my systems entirely separate. So one person can work on one, and then that just interfaces with another, but they're still 2 separate stacks, so people can work on their own thing and not get on each other's toes.
Yeah, we do like the opposite, where we will both sit at one computer and trade the keyboard back and forth. And so,
my niche tip from personal experience and working on the internals is take multiple walks throughout the day between the problems, and it's amazing how much shorter can the problem, how much quicker can you solve the problem if like midway you're like, okay, I'm gonna go for half an hour and walk around and think about this.
and like get good sleep too, right? Like major thing.
Not at RDC, but after.
No. Never here.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you, the panel. Please give them a round of applause.
Please welcome Klaus Moberg, Jan Miller, Ty Bowie, and Sitsi Kolawole.
All right, guys, quick selfie. Quick selfie. Wait, come on. All right. Hey, everyone, thank you. It's great to see everybody. I'm Klaus Moberg. I'm a vice president of engineering for the user group.
I'm Jan Muller. I'm engineering manager on interactivity in the engine team.
My name is Ty Bowie. I'm a senior director of product in the user group. I have not thrown up on stage yet.
Hi, I'm TT Kolawole, and I lead design on user group.
Okay, awesome. And today, we bring you everything, every platform, all at once. A metaverse, multiverse story. Okay, so I want to introduce Laundromat Studios. They're a great Roblox experience. They've been building on the platform for a while with their game, Tax Audit Defense Simulator. It's an amazing, immersive, ultra nerdy first-person shooter where tax auditors fly at you from a sea of nondescript office buildings with poison-tipped calculators, and you and your friends fend them off with shoulder-mounted, laser-targeted receipt launchers. It's awesome. It's going to be so cool. Like many developers, they've built their experience starting on mobile because it's like the most constrained, small little screen. It was hard. and desktop because they have tons of players and revenue, and they've been really successful. They look around the Roblox ecosystem, they're like, hey, we want to grow. We want to get bigger. And they were at Dave's keynote yesterday, and they know we're going to PlayStation, they know we're going to MetaQuest, like, are these platforms right for us? Well, when they look at consoles, I mean, they already know it's 200 million console units have been sold for the last 2 generations of PlayStation and Xbox around the world. That's huge. They also know that consoles are some of the most advanced consumer graphics hardware out there, and they're going to make their experience look amazing. And with all those players sit down for longer, more dedicated sessions, which means longer play times and more engagement. We know because Roblox users on Xbox spend 18% more time on the platform per day than Roblox's Android users. That higher engagement translates to more Robux spend. Roblox spend per user on Xbox is 2.4 times higher than on mobile. So, okay, consoles have older users who spend, on average, more time and more money on Roblox experiences than your generic user of our other platforms. If I'm Laundromat Studios, clearly I want these players to deeply engage with Tax Audit Defense Simulator. But what about VR? Should they take the time and effort necessary to make their game awesome on the MetaQuest?
Yes.
I mean, talk's over, we can go home. Okay, so MetaQuest doesn't have the massive user base and spend of consoles, but there's still a bunch of really compelling reasons to do this. VR is the most immersive way for your users to enjoy your experience. Do you want your users to be terrified by the monster hanging out behind the door? Do you want them to feel the excitement of taking part in that raid with their friends? VR is the way to do it, right? It's also truly social. Roblox on MetaQuest has massive cross-platform adaptation. When they join a server in their MetaQuest, they are immediately immersed in a server with friends and players from all of our other platforms. They can co-play with their friends regardless of whether their friend has a MetaQuest headset, and this is a huge differentiator relative to most of the other VR-specific social platforms that exist today. You're going to be in a full server, and you're going to be interacting with tons of people, regardless of what hardware those other people have. And you know what? Showing off your skills makes you, as the developer, or Laundromat Studios in this case, way more attractive for partners. Innovative brands look for innovative developers, and building in VR and building great experiences in VR shows how innovative and high quality your game is.
Thanks, Klaus. So Laundromat Studios is convinced. They want to grow their business, they want to grow their title, they want to grow their brand. And they know that they need to bring Tax Audit Defense Simulator to console and VR. I'm super nerdy, I would totally play this game. I actually enjoy doing my taxes. They don't know how they're going to do it, but they know they will do it, so they're going to jump right in. So what do? They launch Roblox Studio, when suddenly, crack! Visually stunning, but somehow impressively cheap special effects surround them. They get a little disoriented, a little lightheaded, they stumble around, a little heartburn or something, I don't know. They start snapping back and forth between the 2 universes in this multiverse. You have Universe 1, over there, where they build for one platform at a time. Makes sense. And then there's Universe 2, where they build for everything, every platform all at once. So we're going to take you on a journey between these 2 universes. Starting with Universe 1. They know they want to grow onto new platforms, so they do something that roughly makes sense. It kind of follows what they've done already. They are going to migrate their existing mobile and desktop apps over to console and VR. Unfortunately, this means they fall into a trap of a few assumptions that they've made. So mobile, as you know, typically means touch. Not always, but typically. Desktop usually means mouse and keyboard navigation. Again, not always, but usually. And so they've designed their experience like this. Lots of little buttons all over the place, because it's easy for a user with a mouse to move their mouse, click, move their finger, tap. Super easy. That's how they've designed it. Console, however, as you know very well, I'm sure, means something else. It usually means controller. Again, not always, but usually means controller. So they can't just keep this UI. Right? They could just add controller navigation support, but they need to do more. They should redesign their UI to be comfortable for controller navigation. Snap over to the other side. Universe 2, designing for controllers. They know they need to do this. So they know it's completely different, right? So it's not a bunch of little icons around that they have to tap. Users on controllers expect a few things. So consider this. Imagine trying to navigate your entire interface with 4 buttons, up, down, left, right, and then 2, select, and back. It's just 6 buttons total. Can you do it? As you're designing your UI, ask yourself this question. How many moves is the user going to have to take to find the play button? How many moves is the user going to have to take to get them to do the action I want them to do? Right? This is not something you think about with mouse and keyboard, or with finger and tap. Right? You're just like, the button's right there. It's no big deal. It's different with a controller. And if you design your UI this way, you'll simplify the UI for all platforms. Right? Remember, you're not trying to design just for controller. You're not trying to design just for mouse. You're trying to design for something that works across all these inputs. And if you do it in this way, you will simplify your design. Your game will look better, I guarantee you. And it'll be easier for your user to understand and figure out what's going on. Remember, controllers are not just for consoles. They're controllers for VR. I know that you have controllers in that box right there. And people can attach controllers to PCs, of course, and can attach controllers to mobile devices as well. So it's good for all platforms. Another thing, you guys probably know this already as well, but it's just a good thing to remind you. Controllers also usually mean haptic feedback, the vibrations in your controller. We've had this actual support for years, 7 years at least, right, of haptic support.
So Dave didn't know it in the Q&A. That's okay.
Sorry?
Dave didn't know we had it in the Q&A
Dave didn't know that.
but we do. We
Okay.
have haptic support on all platforms that support it.
Yeah. This is just us reminding you and encouraging you to add this extra layer of immersion to your game. You can have them physically feel the action, and especially now that you can develop for VR, that extra immersion is even that much more important in VR. There are a lot of examples to do this. So physically feeling the action is your user falls off a cliff and like a splat on the ground, right? That's a super easy way to do it. Very obvious, super cool. You can get the user's attention. For instance, a new customer has walked into their pizza restaurant and they aren't paying attention. Hey, new customer, get your attention, go serve the new customer. Or you can notify users of UI actions. For instance, they've hit a disabled button or they've scrolled to the bottom of a list. Good way to get their attention. Get creative. It's your experience. You guys know, obviously. You guys know best. A few tips, though, general tips. One, don't overdo it. I'm sure you guys have played games where it's like everything is vibrating all the time. It can actually get annoying after a while, so don't overdo it. It's easy not to get excited because it's super easy to do. You kind of throw it everywhere. Another thing, you can actually design your vibrations. So different vibrations can mean different things. Our API allows you to control the individual motors in the controller or in the haptic device individually. So you can set the intensity and duration of the vibration independently. So you can design whatever you want. Last thing, use it consistently. So let's say you're creating a few different vibrations for different things. It can confuse the user if you do a vibration for something positive, like an avatar leveling up, and also something negative, like an avatar dying. That can actually cause confusion for the user, and they don't know why it's vibrating. So think about that. So like I said, we've had this support actually for years. Just look for haptic service in the dev documentation. Tons of great examples, sample code, drop it in, and design your game. One more thing about designing for controllers. If you guys have been playing your games in the demo booth, I've been giving demos to probably some of you guys here. A lot of you have put Xbox-specific icons in your game, because we've only supported Xbox for so long, right? So you put Xbox-specific icons to educate your users on what buttons do. So we're obviously expanding to new platforms, obviously PlayStation, maybe others in the future. So we're creating a new API, which is launching in the next couple weeks, probably, that allows you to show the correct icon for the correct controller. So we are providing default assets to show you the shapes or the letters as necessary. But if you don't like those default assets, you can actually customize it and design your own assets to fit the look and feel of your experience. We are also working on a no-code solution. I don't think we have a date for that, but it's something to make it even easier for you to show the correct icons at the correct time. Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, Ty. All right, so we are back on Universe 1. So Universe 1 is where Laundromat Studios is building per platform, designing the UI custom bespoke. And they know that their game looks good on mobile and desktop, so they've sized up their UI, their buttons, their selectors, as well as their UI elements. And they're actually switching between UI versions using fixed sizing, static pixels, and input methods such as touch-enabled. They're switching between mobile and PC, right, using input methods. So they're focusing on touch for mobile, and they're doing keyboard and mouse for PC. However, they obviously realize that their UI is rendering too small on console. It's very difficult to read, and it's not optimized for the living room. And so they need to reconsider how they're resizing for console. There's just so many complex changes that they need to take into account. And then on top of that, with gamepads, there's also a lot of complexity in terms of how gamepads are rendering as they input into the actual devices. Okay, so flash over to Universe 2, where Laundromat Studios is actually building universally and adaptively, scaling their UI across all the different platforms. They know that the real estate and distance is going to be really key and important in how they're building and sizing their UI. And so they recognize and understand the ergonomics of it all. So users sit 10 feet away from the screen on relative to a console. So they want their UI to be comfortable, easy to navigate. They want their fonts to be very legible. And in order to scale their UI comfortably, they need to take into account the scale factor of 1.5x, right? So that's kind of like the optimal way you want to scale your UI for 10 feet. For VR, there's also the consideration of making sure that Laundromat Studios needs to ensure that they're actually reducing the complexity of their UI, so taking away unnecessary elements and just focusing in on the key elements that are needed. Okay, so how are they actually going to accomplish this? So in Universe 2, Laundromat knows that we're all about allowing you to build and scale your UI adaptively, and that's our mission. And so they are able to implement their UI using relative size and relative position. So everything is implemented as a percentage of the frame. And so they're able to use features like UI size constraints to be able to scale the UI dynamically. And they can implement scrolling frames to make sure that they actually reduce the clutter on the screen. The output method that they focus on is using is10-foot interface and VR enabled. That's the optimal way to do it. And they also make sure that they're actually using output characteristics to switch between the UI settings. Now, the key thing here in Universe 2 is to make sure that there's no mixing of the input and output methodologies in order to make sure that the switches are done correctly. Over to you, Jan.
All right, let's talk about VR. So Laundromat Studios consider something I'm really excited about, bringing their tax audit defense simulator to VR. And they've always targeted high-end devices, PCs, phones that have latest hardware. And they're trying to bring this on the Quest 2. And soon in Universe number 1, they realized there's performance issues. There's stuttering, the users start complaining about discomfort. So what happened and what can we do about it? Well, in Universe number 2, Laundromat Studios know that performance and comfort are the most important aspects of VR. You have to hit at least 72 FPS to have a stable frame rate to not get people sick. It's right in front of your eyes. Even small dips and inconsistencies, you feel them. You feel the movement becoming sluggish. And once people get sick, they will not come back to your experience. It's really important to focus on that. So what can we do? Well, there's a bunch of things our engine does already for you. Application Space Warp, we implemented frame generation, meaning we effectively double your frame rate by extrapolating frames from motion buffers. And the auto frame rate manager. The auto frame rate manager is the thing that makes your game look worse. And I know that's like, why would you want that? But it does everything it can in the auto setting to keep your frame rate stable above 72 FPS. We target around 76 to 80 frames per second. But Laundromat Studios in universe number 2, they know there's a ton of things they can do themselves that not only benefit VR, but all lower-end devices. You can look at the physics debugger. We just released a new visual physics debugger that lets you see physical objects in your scene that are very costly, like stuck under some geometry, for example. You can enable streaming to remove amounts of objects in the distance. And you can, of course, look at your scripts. You can see on the Quest device directly whether you're CPU or GPU bound. So if you're CPU bound, most likely some script is shooting too many raycasts or just doing too many computations. And then something that's specific to the renderer on Quest or on mobile VR in general, they are very sensitive to any kind of overdraw and high draw calls, which makes sense. You have two screens, basically two views that you render at the same time on a mobile chip. So if you have a lot of decals, a lot of transparent textures, transparent parts, please try to remove those in VR. So moving on, Laundromat Studios in universe number 2, they also know the importance of our player script. We just launched the Quest beta with over 50,000 of your experiences working without any coding necessary. And that was only possible because we continuously improve those scripts and adopt them to new platforms like the Meta Quest. We're adding new cameras, new comfort options, and like this is one example, the step rotation, which removes continuous motion for people that are motion sensitive. Another example is our vignette in our Blink. Similarly, they remove the motion at the peripheral vision. So when you move through the world, you can imagine that what's on the outside of your vision has the most motion, but it's also the least important, really, to experience the world. So reducing the field of view helps people with motion sickness. Hiding teleports helps people with motion sickness. All of these options so far were kind of just, you can set them in the menu and they're just there. But we are gonna ship a new comfort settings menu with the next build for Quest and for PC VR as well. It's going to have a custom setting like it was before, where all the settings and all the new settings go, and you can individually change them. But it also comes with 3 presets, with comfort, default, and expert. And basically, the question of which settings are right for you should go mostly away. If you're a beginner, comfort is the ideal, removes the most motion. For most people, the default will be enough. And the expert mode removes all the helpers and will just let you experience the whole motion in the experience. So Laundromat Studios know the most important part of all of this, of the player scripts and of these comfort settings, are the cameras. We shipped with 2 cameras, the beta of Quest 2, with the fixed third-person camera, which the idea there is that we remove as much motion as possible. The camera teleports to the target position. And so people that are very motion sensitive, they don't get sick because they're following around the character. And then the first-person mode, which is more immersive, and lets you experience the world out of the avatar's eyes. But we also realized that a lot of our users are more experienced than we actually thought. So starting with the next build, we're going to launch a default follow camera that has full control, moves with the avatar. You can rotate the camera around your avatar. And people actually sitting in this room are currently working on a new feature that we're going to launch soon that will always keep the avatar in front of you. So even if you turn around in VR and you walk the other way, your avatar will automatically come back into view. Very excited to ship that soon with the next build on Quest. As a reminder, if you do your own camera, that's cool. If you want to do your own VR camera because you have a specific gameplay experience, that's cool. But we're doing all this work so you don't have to. Even if you do your own systems, every once in a while, get the latest scripts, get the latest comfort options, and integrate them, please. Thanks.
All right, so clearly Universe 2, they did it, right? Laundromat Studios designed, built, and launched Tax Audit Defense Simulator for everything, every platform, all at once. They are now one of the most popular and highest earning titles on consoles, and H&R Blocks has reached out about co-branding. But there was an unanticipated side effect of doing all this the right way. Right? Their experience is actually better on all Roblox platforms. They have haptics on mobile. They have gamepad support on PC and mobile. Their performance has increased on all platforms. Their UI is more beautiful and easier to navigate. And perhaps most importantly, their code base is future-proofed in case Roblox announces new platforms in the future. right?
Right, Dave?
So they created an experience that their users can play on whatever device they want. They've saved the multiverse from annihilation. And somehow they repaired their relationship with their daughter at the same time that I mentioned that they were having difficulty communicating with the high school. Anyway, whatever. Okay, so what do you do next? Just behind us, we have booths where you can test your experience on PlayStation, Xbox, and in VR on a MetaQuest Pro device. Check out the docs. Everything we mentioned in this talk is really well documented in the developer docs, and work on your experience. MetaQuest beta is out now, and we'll be launching officially in the MetaQuest store, so all of our users can find it really easily this month. PlayStation will be launching to the public next month. You want to be ready, you want to be there for it.
If your experience is published on Xbox, it will be automatically published on PlayStation.
It'll
just go
automatically
work on
publish
Xbox right now.
That's right. And finally, I mean, one more thing. I think you all know this, but our friends at Meta are giving all of you free MetaQuest Pro headsets. So if you haven't picked that up yet, this just goes to show how much importance they are placing on getting all of you to build for VR. Is truly awesome, and we hope that you guys use those to just build incredible experiences that work amazingly on all platforms and offer incredible experiences to all users. So with that, we have, I think, about 11 minutes to take questions. And there's microphones at the front of both aisles. So.
Hello, my name is Sigmatech. I work for Sawhorse Interactive. And so the first thing that, we got those Quest Pros, I mean, amazing. So like I'm thinking about development, right? And I'm thinking about like rapidly prototyping. Like oftentimes I test something, I'm testing it like minute by minute. And to think about, like having to publish the experience to Roblox to test it on the headset seems like it's gonna be like really hard, especially if the game is live. I'm wondering if like, we're thinking about perhaps like, making some sort of like studio integration where we could like do it on the local network so that, we can have that wireless experience instead of like maybe, plugging in a USB-C. I'm wondering if that's, being thought of.
On studio side?
On the studio side, I don't know the answer to that, but it's an awesome idea.
Yeah,
I'll make sure Nick and Tian hear the feedback. I believe today, if you use PC VR, like a tethered headset, which Meta didn't provide, you could do that. But finding a way to make that iteration loop super rapid between studio and like standalone headsets is an awesome idea, and we'll make sure studio gets that feedback.
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea to have hot deploy to Quest, and we have been thinking about it internally. In the meantime, you can like profile on a mobile chipset, and it's like if you get like a Galaxy S20-ish chipset, it's very similar performance.
Yeah, the Quest 2, so you guys have Quest Pros, which are higher end, right? But the Quest 2 is the one that's been sold a lot of. So if you want to hit a lot of users, you Quest 2. And that's, like you said, like a mid-range Android is roughly what you're targeting for performance.
Cool. All right, can I answer the second?
Go for it.
Is haptic service going to be on mobile as well? Can we?
It is.
Oh,
we
okay.
Already is today.
Okay.
I know we didn't do a lot of fanfare, but yeah, we launched haptic servers as it is on mobile. So if you use the gamepad haptic servers, it actually works on Android and iOS now. And we're working on a better version that has like more control over the effects, but it works right now.
Cool. Can I slip in a third question? Is it possible to access maybe the pixel pitch, like so we can determine if an experience is like on a 10-foot screen or like a super like an 8K screen versus like maybe like a like resolution alone doesn't tell us enough about what we're looking at. So maybe like the distance between the pixels on the device.
So really, I think what we're talking about here is pixel density versus virtual pixels.
Yeah.
I do think we have some work to do to refine that. Like, again, we don't want people forking your code bases to say like, if I am guessing this is on mobile, do an entirely different thing on this version than
math,
Right, exactly. But like, based on the actual real world pixel density versus the real world device size, that's what you should actually be building for. And I think it's a
like what's the pixel density on a VR headset, right? Like it's difficult to argue around that. Input capabilities is much more what we're focusing on.
The strategy of what you're saying is absolutely what we want to do. We haven't figured out the details.
Okay, cool. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we switch to that side?
Let's go over here.
Hello, I'm Roger, and I'm also working at Sohorse. So considering we're getting Roblox in PlayStation, is there any plans to maybe bring PlayStation VR into Roblox?
So that's a great question. Initially, the binary that we're shipping on PlayStation is a PlayStation 4 binary, not a PlayStation 5 binary, which is required to support PSVR 2. So when we update that binary to be a PS5 native binary, we then have the option of adding PSVR support. It's not officially on the roadmap yet, but we're heavily considering it. It's just, we were looking at all of the various platform expansion directions we can go, and we just have to figure out which one's the right next option.
Thank you.
Hello, so my question is, how will the enumeration names for the key codes for PlayStation work? Because right now, we have button A, B, X, Y, but we have an X on PlayStation, but it doesn't map the same, so how's that going to work?
So the way it works right now is that it actually does map. So we basically virtually map your Xbox buttons to the PlayStation icons. We're also going to, of course, support native key codes for PlayStation, and then as we expand that API for different platforms.
And those will kind of go like back and forth. Like if I were to code in the PlayStation enums, it would also be the Xbox ones as well?
Correct. It automatically maps. So basically, you just write one line of code, like get keypad, like get the icon for this key code, and you get the right one for platform.
Awesome. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jasper. I work at Lightning Splash. I'm wondering if there's any plans to implement a sort of pinch emulator for mobile.
In Studio?
Interesting.
It's a great idea.
Emulation team.
Yeah, we'll make sure that gets documented and brought to Studio, but absolutely, we should have that.
Sweet, thank you, that's all I had.
Can I call it Brad to write that down? There was that one. There was a previous one, which was the the VR in Studio emulation.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Riker. I couldn't help but notice that it said that like VR would run at 72 FPS, and I just wanted to make sure is it basically becoming standard to make your game like non-FPS independent and stuff, so that it doesn't break if anyone plays in VR and stuff?
That should always
because it's
be
not
true.
capped at 60.
That should always be true.
Oh, I know, but
yeah, it's not even capped at 60 on Android either. So in general, don't make it frame rate dependent. Always do a DT times DT or something in your code. But effectively, we're running around 38 frames per second. That's what we're targeting, and then we're doubling that. So it ends up at like 76. And if it dips below that, we're starting to remove assets from your scene to make it run faster.
Yeah, cool.
Through over here?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Tiger Captain, and I have a question concerning determining the difference between using an Xbox and a PlayStation, because we use a lot of custom icons for stylized forms in our game, and I know that you allowed the difference for the functionality between using, say, an X button and, say, a square button, or whatever it maps to. But if we're using custom icons, we have to swap them all out. Is there like a user input service or a get platform for we have is 10-foot device, so is PlayStation, right? What would that map to?
Right. So the way it's supposed to work, and I think the API for that, the documentation is coming out this week, is that you can write your own mapping. You can have a table of buttons, and then you can get the platform-dependent key code and map to them if you want to do that. So you can create your table with all the different icons you want and say, well, it's the PlayStation triangle button is this texture. We're going to give an example for that.
So can I add though? Philosophically, we would rather not know branch depending on Xbox versus PlayStation, because there is a third console, fourth console, fifth console, and we want you to be able to not worry about that and publish on every console that we end up supporting.
Please keep in mind that your PlayStation controller can be connected to an iOS device or a PC, or you can even connect an Xbox controller to your Quest 2, and it works.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Blackout Dev. I work with Neuro Studios. So mine kind of follows what you just said. Will you be able to identify what controller someone is using if it's on PC? So like if I'm using a PlayStation controller or an Xbox controller, we'll be able to identify which one of those it is?
Yes, the feature isn't ready yet, but we're working on it right now. That you can get it's basically how it will work is that you are trying to get the key code, and it will say, well, this one doesn't exist. The other one exists, and you know which controller it is, basically.
Okay, add a quick follow-up one. Are you guys planning on ever pushing frame generation to other platforms as well, or just keeping it with VR?
Application Space Warp is specific to Quest. I don't know whether we want to do this on other platforms, something like this.
I think we would certainly ship it on any head-mounted display that we support. Remember, like, it's just an interpolated frame, so it's not true 76 FPS. I think as a platform, we would love to get the game engine to the point where it's supporting safely higher than 30 FPS or whatever we're rendering at on other platforms, but like we'd like to do it the real way, where like the actual frame rate is there. So that's the long-term vision. In the meantime, we're doing frame warp on head-mounted displays.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so this might be a little bit of a silly question because people can go out and buy like poor hardware to benchmark on, but I was wondering if Roblox had any plans to essentially like for the emulator, if they had plans to like attempt to mimic a device's hardware restraints.
That is another fantastic suggestion for the emulator, and we'll take that back to the creator team, but I think 100% we should be able to enable you to do testing within emulation of a wide range of hardware input and output modalities as well as hardware capabilities. So it's an awesome idea.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Luca. This might be a bit of a simple question, but I know you mentioned that Xbox-compatible games are being published automatically onto PS5. But I know that when we published it initially on Xbox, we had to agree to some moderation differences, such as I have a custom Xbox wheel chat for my game. Is there any moderation differences that we need to worry about when it's automatically being published to PS5?
No, in fact, I don't know if we've announced this, but that checkbox with the moderation differences, I believe, has already disappeared.
Yeah, it's gone already.
So those requirements no longer exist, and all Roblox content is now appropriate on all of our console platforms, and will be appropriate on the console platforms we're launching in the near future.
Yeah, if people aren't exactly aware of what we're talking about, there used to be a series of things you need to agree to. Like there's no gore, there's this, that, there are a few different things.
No blood.
That is, we've talked to Xbox, we've talked to PlayStation. That is no longer a requirement across the board.
Thank you.
It's a great question.
Hi, I'm Camille RoboCambot in Roblox. I had a question about the frame rate and how it gets adjusted. Does that apply to animations you bring in from Blender, like for NPCs? Do those get adjusted to if I imported like a 30 FPS animation?
It doesn't adjust the animation playback. It only adjusts, like, it reduces the quality of your scene to heighten the frame rate if you like drop below 72 FPS. But it doesn't, like, basically internally you would run at that point around 30 FPS, and then we start to remove objects from the scene, but the animations don't get affected. We don't do like animations and rate scaling or anything like that.
But frame warp would effectively space warp, would effectively double the frame rate still, because it's at the frame buffer level, not.
It would if it like correctly guesses how the animation interpolates. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Would you recommend to like adjust my animations from Blender, like give it 70 or 72 FPS when I'm importing them?
I would not recommend that, no. Just keep working the way you work right now, the way you're used to.
Oh, okay.
Hey, so we're out of time. Those are the questions. We can meet you outside. We're happy to do so if you'd like.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Please join us in welcoming to the stage are representatives from our product and engineering team for the Create Q&A.
Hey everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Now, this is your chance to ask your burning questions to product and engineering leadership at Roblox. Now, there are 2 Q&A sessions going on right this second, as you may or may not know. So in the tent is a different Q&A session. That one's focused on things like search and discovery, the economy, subscriptions, brand partnerships, education, civility, and influencer. So you have burning questions in that domain, please feel free to hike over there real fast. Now this group, on the other hand,
is the better one.
You can see we all got the brief on the uniform to wear, except Garima. But no, this is an eclectic group of people that can answer practically every question I think you may have. So we ask everyone that has a question to please come up to the mics left and right. And while you do that, I'm going to get our panelists warmed up with a complete softball question. So panelists, what features are you most excited about that we have announced at RDC that you're most excited about? And let's start with Garima.
I think most of you can guess what I'm most excited about if you were at the keynote yesterday. I'm really excited about Connect and the calling API that's coming with it. And I think the reason I'm most excited about it is communication is so core to Roblox. So many of you have been integrating voice and camera tracking and wanting to integrate other like private communication use cases. And this is our very big step towards it. And it's a very big step towards immersive communication. Where people can really feel like they're with each other, and it's really exciting. Like, I don't think you can do this on any other product in the world today, and it's a big, big, big step towards communication, so I'm very excited about it. And I'm more excited to see how you all use it. I can't begin to imagine everything.
I'm going to shift gears and ask Josh from our engine team.
In case you didn't hear, we are shipping a mesh and texture API. I'm super excited about this because from day one, we've built this to work in experience and not just in studio. I think this is going to power a whole new generation of in-experience creation tooling, and I cannot wait to see what you all do with it. It's going to take the platform to a whole new level.
Definitely. Jen, what are you most looking forward to?
It's a tough question because there's been so many great announcements. I think if I had to choose one, from a user perspective, I'm super excited that we're coming to the PlayStation. On the other hand, I'm also super excited to learn about Assistant, the conversational AI creation tool. I think it's a game changer. It's going to unleash such a wide range of creativity on the platform for novices and professionals alike. It's really going to allow the platform to see creativity and diversity of experiences that we've never seen before. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what that has in store, what you guys are able to create with that in the months and years to come.
So we really didn't prepare any real conversation, so please come up for a live Q&A. We really want to answer like your burning questions, or have you been Q&A'd out already? Is that what's going on here?
What are your plans for the future of more advanced development tools like mirroring and stuff like that? I'd love to hear more about what you're doing in that area.
Josh or?
So we're always thinking about what tools to build next. And frankly, we look at a lot of your feedback to influence our roadmap. We've thought about mirroring a little bit. I don't know off the top of my head if it's on the roadmap or not. I'm assuming you mean like mirroring for animation with avatars and all. I can certainly follow up offline and get back to you if you wonder specifically about that. But I would say if there's anything in particular you want and have feedback for, find us afterwards and tell us.
Or tell us now, that's cool. Please.
Hello. So I really love Sorry, this is really low. I really love the direction that Roblox is going in with the in-experience creation and then publishing of assets. I saw during the keynote that there was a point where you could take an in-experience screen capture and then save it to your camera roll. As a corollary to that, will you ever allow users to record video in experience and then potentially share it on the platform?
Garima?
Yeah, I can speak more to it. The short answer is yes. I don't know in the classic Roblox style if it'll be just video. We need to figure out what's the right format for Roblox and what's the right format for like 3D immersive viewing of these things. It could be replays, it could be just being inside that experience. I think Roblox has an opportunity to recreate the next format. So I'm very excited. Screenshots is definitely our first step, and there's a lot more to come here.
I think the fundamental thing to think about is like we would want video for being able to post off platform, right? Like broadcast from Roblox elsewhere, but on platform video like isn't as useful to us as the 3D scene as it was constructed. And so I think we'd also love to think about ways to preserve and share that, and then maybe even make it interactable and do other cool future looking things with it. So lots to come here. And it's definitely something we're thinking about moving forward.
One example I always talk about is, a few years ago, people would take silent movies and photos, and then it became videos. And now it's kind of like, we could do videos, but the world as it has known for the last couple of years has been looking at a screen with a video playing. But what if you could be inside it, and what if you could interact with it, and what if you could learn from it? And I think that's really where the content format is going. So we need to figure out how to make it all happen. But we're thinking about it.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just thinking like not even necessarily video, like it could be a new type of immersive format, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And like Roblox could be a new type of social media platform that could leverage this.
One might even say we already are.
Yeah, exactly, right?
You're speaking our language, because that word you just used, we've actually ideated with that same sort of language internally.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Of course. Thank you for asking.
So, hello, I'm Dan, and what I wanted to ask about, so Roblox is currently very, very good at man-made creations, so lots of stuff to do with bricks and concrete and stuff like that. However, natural options for building are quite limited. It's quite hard to, for example, naturally grow moss or to introduce damp or cracks into things. So what I'd like to ask is, what are your plans for more natural building, more organic things, perhaps like scattering, procedural stuff? What do you think?
Josh, you want to take a crack at that?
We just shipped grass height, and you're already asking for more?
Oh, I'm just so excited by the grass, I just want more.
As well, you should be asking for more.
Yeah.
Look, I'll tell you, we're thinking about more. It is genuinely hard, and we're trying, just to kind of give you a peek behind the curtain. When we take on something like this, we want to make sure that we do things in ways that are still going to work in 10 years, that today work on a low-end Android device, that are as easy as possible for you to craft and more. These are really hard problems, so these systems and the design needs to be really thoughtful. Like when we think about, hey, how might you actually do, whether you call it scattering or set dressing, a great system there, we actually want to think about, well, how do we make that easier? What does this mean in the context of like biomes? How might that relate to materials? How do you set it up so that if you have grass in a field versus sparse in a forest, you actually get different objects on top of that too? So a lot of these things are on our mind, and you'll see them come from us over the next few years. But to quote Arseny, I'm going to say that falls into the not soon bucket.
Now, were you asking about kind of the simulation of these things, or in terms of making it easier to create that kind of vegetation?
Mostly just about the creation side of it. So for buildings, I'm not necessarily talking about dynamic simulations, just about like set dressing, that sort of thing. So as you mentioned, like procedurally scattering around vegetation and stuff like that.
Nick, we kind of demoed some of that stuff as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of really interesting things happening here. One of the things we've been talking about in the future packages is having like higher level interfaces and capabilities that might be more procedurally generated, like you could ask the plant to grow or the tree to branch more, that sort of thing. I think when we talk about in-experience creation, it also just opens up a ton of possibility. Like if you're trying to scatter, maybe plants would be a bad example, but maybe you're trying to scatter some rocks or something like that. Well, we have a physics simulator, right? So how about if you just like drop them from way up in the air, and then they'll naturally scatter, and you'll get this really organic pattern. So I think And that's how we're thinking about creation, is like you'll do some things in studio, you might do some things in simulation, you'll be able to go back and forth, which I think gets to some of what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
The other thing we're thinking about is we actually internally had a generative AI demo where we, in fact, were making things more mossy or not, and using the AI to help search through Marketplace and find the right assets and combine them together in creative ways. So I think there's going to be other ways as well for different levels of creators. But great question.
My name is Caleb, or Blackout Dev on Roblox. I'm a 3D environment artist, and I was thinking a lot about your new tooling for a lot of like modifying textures for things in studio, or well, in experience. So I was thinking about, if I make a building, what would be the possibility of in the future expanding the capabilities of it to be able to do something like vertex painting on a building? So like, say I have a plain brick building and I want to add dirt on the bottom, or cracks or edge wear or things like that somewhere, or say paint stucco over it or something like that. What are the thoughts on adding something like that?
So you're really asking about material layering?
Yeah.
It is certainly on our roadmap. We are thinking about it right now. I will just say that the new dynamic image, whatever the final name was, that's going to be the start of a lot of the pieces you're looking for.
Okay, cool. And then I had like one really quick follow-up one. Has anybody thought about decal projection?
Yeah, a little bit actually. We want to find ways to integrate with material systems so that we get more of the other properties, so that we can make it emulate the real world when we want to get physics involved, instead of just being an image projected somewhere.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you.
Great question. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Trip. I just wanted to ask if any of you have any thoughts or insights on upgrades to the user input service, specifically looking at sort of like Unreal Engine and the enhanced input plugin, and the way that they handle sort of input maps and this sort of really deep platform abstraction, if there's any plans for stuff like that.
Klaus or Josh?
I'm not familiar with the Unreal plugin and what level it's abstracted to. Can you say a little bit more?
Yeah, so let's say like you have I have touch controls for movement, I've got a thumbstick, and then I've got WASD. You can essentially take all of these inputs and list them out in a map, which kind of outputs to one sort of input object, which can, and then there's middleware involved that kind of transforms that into one type of input, vector input, or just up, down, left, right. So like all of these platforms essentially become one object.
Yeah, I think that's very consistent with how we would like the input to work in the Roblox engine as well. Maybe we can catch up afterwards and figure out where we're currently falling short, but the idea is that input modality on each platform that we support should be fully abstracted at the point at which it actually translates into a verb that's being executed by the avatar. And so, it shouldn't matter whether it's keyboard, mouse, gamepad, DualShock or DualSense, or what hand controllers and MetaQuest. All of those should be things that ultimately your game code isn't looking for a specific button input from a specific controller type. It's listening for abstracted either vector input or eventually even avatar verbs. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Awesome. And I'll catch you up. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to add that we are actually actively designing and thinking about a new movement system across the board. That will kind of, exactly your question around like, how do we take lots of different kinds of inputs and how do we make it really consistent across different platform types or devices, but also how do you abstract that into like simple four input or 4 key versions, along with like saying maybe there is a specialized version that does a certain verb and stuff like that. So we are actually actively thinking about it. There's more to come. We'll cover a little bit of that in the next talk as well.
And I'll add to that, avatar movement, like forward, back, left, right. I think we're pretty close, and I'd love to hear more about where and if we're missing the mark. For like selectable input, buttons, touchscreen, et cetera. We will always have a level where developers can access the raw input because we want you to be able to build custom things there. But at the same time, we want all of you thinking about the fact that Roblox intends to support more platforms in the future. Those platforms have different input types. If you look at some of the things that have been announced in the industry, some of them don't even have buttons, right? So we want to make sure that we're building future-proof abstractions for all of that, and there's a lot more to come.
Awesome, thank you. And I'll talk to you outside.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You should see the internal test where we put Klaus in a mocap suit and make him walk around the office.
Hi, my name's Jasper. I'm wondering if there's any plans on more lighting effects, such as like chromatic aberration or other, like just basically shaders also, like shader material support as well.
Yeah, right now our focus with lighting is twofold. One is bringing future lighting to Android. You saw a preview of that yesterday. And the second is that we want to add a new, basically replace the CPU voxel light grid with a GPU voxel light grid that looks much, much better. So that's going to give us consistent, scalable lighting, no pops, et cetera. Once we have that in place, then we'll start thinking about how to go further and what options there are to improve it, to add different types of camera effects and more.
I remember there was a hack week and there was a few shaders, like there was a fisheye shader and those kinds of things. Are those still planned?
We have them on the back burner right now. Frankly, it's just an issue of team bandwidth and priorities as opposed to like, oh, we do or don't want to do those necessarily.
Same thing with material shaders.
We hear you.
I think one of the, if you don't mind coming back for a second, I think one thing that we've been interested to hear more from the community about is, what are the exact applications you were thinking about for material shaders?
I think a big one is like flat colors that aren't affected by lighting, because right now you can only really do that with neon or like a selection box, or highlights, but highlights are kind of limited in terms of how many you can have. I think moving textures and like something node-based would be really cool. Like Unity has a PBR node-based system for shader graphs, and I think something like that could be really interesting. Stuff like cell fracturing and basically making a mesh go in and out of existence, if that makes sense. Just kind of, There's also stuff like vignettes, like having a highlight that's not like a directly, like a highlight, like an outline. It's more of like a fade in and out. But just stuff like that would be really cool.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Of course.
Hey, so my name's Josh, LG Lacey, and I was wondering if there's any plans to either raise the highlight limit or have a way for it to be automatically managed. Because if I have a highlight in the workspace that's just sitting replicated storage even, that counts towards the limit even though you will never see it.
I haven't heard any plans about that. I don't know if any of you have, but I can follow up afterwards.
Yeah, I think it's great feedback. A more dynamic system there would make a lot of sense.
Cool, thank you.
Hello, I'm Noah. I do some of the UI, UX design for Frontlines, and so kind of doing a lot of the main menu interactions. Just was kind of wondering if you'd like, looking forward to just the UI on Roblox, are you gonna like natively support like slider options? Because I know like Unity and like Godot, those engines already support those. Like we already, a lot of the things for like just creating a settings page, it's a lot of manual kind of having to do it in-house. Just kind of wondering what the future is like for that.
Short answer is yes. Right now, our priority is, you saw a preview of it if you came to the engine talk this morning. We're building out style sheets, so you can change the look and feel of UI with one click, works in 3D objects as well. Flex layouts are the next bit, essentially more responsive layouts, so you build your UI once, it auto-adapts better to all platforms. We do have an improved set of components on the roadmap. We want to do those two things first, though.
Cool. I just had a follow-up question, is that some of the engines also support like some blend modes for frames. So you can like have, kind of in Photoshop with layers, you can have like, I don't know, background effects. So you can blur images behind certain frames. I don't know if like the direction for the engine, just for UI, is gonna go in any ways where you can alter things behind frames or kind of blend certain elements.
Yeah, we've certainly got a lot of requests the past 2 days about UI blur. Not on the roadmap right now, but we'll certainly look at it.
Cool, thank you.
So while Dan walks up to the mic, loving all the engine questions, we also have people from safety, from international. So if you want to mix it up or have questions about the rest of Roblox, we're ready and willing to take any question.
Really, he's sick of my voice.
Well, unfortunately, I have another question about UI, so about mixing it up. I think I have one word here that I think lots of people will agree is kind of missing from Roblox right now in terms of UI. Anti-aliasing. So rotated UIs right now, they're looking a little bit worse for wear. So even if only on like high-end graphics, high-end computers, will we see anti-aliasing for UI anytime soon?
I'm trying to think of a funny reply, and I'm
By the way,
struggling.
the Universal app would like this too. Just just to be clear.
Did you all see how Studio was refreshed about a year ago now with high
Yeah.
DPI and how fantastic it looked? Yes, we hear you. Understood.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi there, Lancelot with Royal High, and there was been some talk in some other panels and stuff like that, but it was mostly like dev-centered, I guess. And I guess we're kind of curious from Roblox's end, how likely is it to actually have a feature where Roblox is allowing users to essentially buy developer products, game passes for other players? Like some devs have created like gifting systems within their own games where you could buy something for another player. Is that on your radar at all? And how likely are we to see that, I guess?
The one group that's not represented here to answer that question.
You said any question.
Yeah, I said we try.
I'm teasing.
So what are you wondering about UI?
I don't have any UI questions.
So we have a bunch of devs that have made gifting systems on the platform already. I agree that we don't have like direct API support for this. I think it's interesting. I think we need to figure out, like, there's probably a large amount of legal and safety implications of doing this that we'd have to really deeply think through to support it as like a first-party functionality. But it's a really interesting suggestion. I think we can take it and follow up.
Yeah, I guess a side note for that then would be for devs that haven't already developed that, does it seem like a conflict at all within the devs to then develop that? Since you mentioned safety and legal and stuff like that. I feel like most devs obviously don't want to step on toes.
Well, let me say this. I think the experiences that exist on the platform today that do this, I don't think we have an issue with them from a safety perspective.
No, it is from the policies we don't prevent it, as far as I know right now. But in general, we are worried about it. If we support it as a first-class feature, then gifting across different kinds of audiences, we do need to be very careful about it.
Could you speak a little bit more to the use case and like the value you have in mind for doing this?
So, I mean, some of the games that have already implemented are games like Jailbreak and stuff, where if a user has Robux and they want to buy, essentially their like battle pass, which is like a long time reward for playing and stuff, but they don't want to like leave their friend behind in progress and stuff like that, they could buy that game pass for them so that they can continue the experience together. Or if you want to like skip a level in a game, basically anything that would separate two users because one user doesn't have Robux, right? You could then include, it's very inclusive to different players.
That's actually really interesting. We think a lot about user-to-user interactions from a user perspective. It's something we are thinking about just as a broader theme for next year, but that's a really interesting idea, and I might find you later to talk more about it.
And you should look for us after as well to give us more details on exactly how you think.
Are you guys to be around the floor, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
We'll find you.
Okay.
We'll be around.
Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Kipatchian for TriX Studios. This is an international question. I know we talked a lot about Japan and India and Brazil. What are some other international markets y'all are excited about?
Oh, that's a great question. I think those countries that you mentioned already, those are definitely high on our radars from a user perspective. A lot of regions we're seeing tremendous growth out of Southeast Asia and Latin America overall. So not just India, but Southeast Asia region in general is one of our fastest growing regions year over year. So I'm super excited about the growth that we're seeing there. Europe as well. We're already growing faster outside of US, Canada than US, Canada in all the major cohorts. Europe, Latin America, Southeast Asia, MENA region, I think in a couple of years is going to be super exciting too. So it's not, I'm sorry to answer it this way, but it's all of these areas we're really excited about for, and it's really interesting to see because you see the growth in different markets taking off at different points in time, but they tend to sort of follow a similar trajectory. So it's really exciting to see when countries start, getting to that point, of that tipping point in various regions.
And a quick follow-up question. Are we concerned or excited, so to say, two sides of the same coin, about perhaps like the average revenue per user of the different regions and how we scale at these different regions and how we're going to match that?
Totally, that's a really great question. And as you guys know, like GDP around the world is not the same, right? It's not equal. And so we're the one team that's not represented here, but I'll try to channel them as much as possible, which is we're thinking about this really, really deeply because we want to make sure that that we're not penalizing users just because they're from a place that typically can't afford a thing that someone from Western Europe can afford. So we're looking into it to look into ways of making that possible, because in reality, our vision is that the Roblox economy mirrors the real world economy, and so we want to make that possible to compensate for the various levels of GDP per capita.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just add one thing. We also still spend a lot of time thinking about China as well. I think we're still excited about it.
Very excited about that too.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Erica. I'm a Brazilian developer, so also from the international team. And I wanted to ask if you guys have plans to geo restrictions for an experience.
To only publish an experience to specific geographies?
Yeah. Like, because we're in Brazil, obviously we know the culture, of course, and what if our team wants to do an experience only for Brazilians? How can we do that?
I don't think we have that, but when we do matchmaking, we essentially coalesce people together into the same region. So if most of our users are from Brazil, you will end up seeing them together. But I don't think we do geofencing.
One thing I might add to it is even ranking. So if your experience is resonating with people in certain countries or in Brazil, the ranking should ideally take care of itself. And so people who see it ranked up should be people who it would appeal more to. So that's another way, that's another way the the system takes care of itself. But a big part of Roblox philosophy is we want things to be available to all the developers and all the users at all times, and we don't want to necessarily restrict things. That being said, I don't know, we have not actively thought about geofencing, and I can imagine that's why.
The one other place where we have thought about this is when, if a region were to implement policy that requires you to somehow change your content, we would probably give you the option to opt out of supporting that region or that country if you didn't want to make that content change. Like, say a country outlawed purple hats, but your game had purple hats in it. You could say, I still want my purple hats, but I'm just not going to publish in that country. We don't really support geographies that have that restrictive policy today. But I don't think we've ever thought of sort of supporting this just so that you could focus on a specific country, because we don't see a lot of cost or risk in if your game is focused on Brazil, why wouldn't that experience still be played in neighboring countries, in other players from Brazil in other countries around the world? It seems intuitive that you'd still want it published elsewhere.
Okay, yeah. For us, I know the brands team is on the other Q&A, but for us, we've lost brands opportunities because of that. And a follow-up question is if, let's say, our studio wants to focus more in a specific region, why can't we see top charts? For example, what are the top games played in Brazil, and also by gender or by age? Do you guys have plans for that?
Jen, on the international side, we've talked about this.
I'm not sure on the creator side. I mean, I think that's a really great suggestion on surfacing that, because internally we do look at that very much in order to see what type of content is really growing for a particular segment of users. And we do see that certain markets favor different types of content. Some favor fighting genre, some favor more shopping, and et cetera. So I think this is an area that that we want to look into and expose more to creators, so that creators know that what type of dynamics of experiences do I want to start exposing to our users. So I think it's a great suggestion.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a
Thank you, guys.
great feature suggestion for our analytics team. Thank you.
Hello again. I had a few more questions about camera effects and stuff. Is there any plans to unlock the FOV from 120?
We haven't talked about it.
Okay. Are there any plans on implementing orthographic camera?
We have talked about that one a bit. I don't know the state of it.
I also want to know if there's any plans on split screen integration. Because I remember at Hack Week there was a demonstration of a split screen. And I know with VR, there's obviously the 2 screens, so that's already kind of a...
Yeah, I haven't heard of it explicitly on the roadmap. I feel like we've talked about orthocams more.
We have talked about having multiple scriptable cameras in space that could render to multiple surfaces. No promises yet, but the user group is also pushing for that. So,
and the same thing with that. That would kind of fall more into improving viewport frames and the cameras on those.
Yeah.
You know, this is really amazing because it helps us corner Josh after this, and we're gonna force him to.
We'll slip you a 20 afterwards.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if David's in the room, like, can we get some more budget for? Can we get some more budget for the rendering team? We hear you. So.
I was also wondering, in terms of split screen, or I wasn't wondering, but we were out in the booth and we were playing the front lines on the PS5, and I was like, this would be great with split screen. So it was just something that came to mind.
Yeah, good point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, actually, let me ask you about that. So in that use case, you'd like to have multiple players, multiple avatars on the same console, but potentially logged in. That's a fantastic thought that we definitely have not thought through supporting right now. Like, the single living room multiple player experience is like one person on console and the other people on mobile or whatever. I think it's definitely something we should think about and
right, because right now it would be more of a hardware thing to have multiple people on.
I'm all about couch co-op. Yep.
And if you have more use cases there, we're interested because we obviously want it for social communication, immersive communication as well.
If anything comes up, I'll come back down.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank
You
you.
should come find us after.
Yeah,
of course. Thank you.
Just to set expectations, we have 3.5 minutes left, so I do want to hope to try to get through most of this, so please.
All right. My question was, I know that you guys were working on the lighting engine, getting it on Android and improving the voxel stuff. Do you have any plans after that on incorporating screen space reflections and stuff to Roblox outside of just the water?
Yeah, TLDRs, we have a bunch of ideas about how we can make lighting even better and a number of things that I don't think anybody here even has imagined possible. And we'll talk about those when we have more to share.
And another quick question. Do you have plans on like giving developers access to like the nav mesh and basically just reading the nav mesh and parts of it for the pathfinding and stuff?
We generally have a philosophy that we want to keep implementation details away from the developer because that gives us the freedom to change it over time. So right now we don't have plans to expose that because we see that more akin to an implementation detail.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, so 2 quick questions. One is, have you had any discussions about particles and trails in viewport frames?
The general challenge with viewport frames is just the performance impact that they have because you're having to render multiple views of the world. And if you can imagine like the range of devices we support, like how that looks in lower end devices. So we've had a lot of thoughts about, hey, what could we do to improve viewport frames, not just for particles in particular, but in general. Some of it might be motivated by folks on stage, but nothing concrete yet.
Cool, thanks. And the second question is, are there any plans for like A/B testing for like icons and thumbnails that's integrated rather than just uploading? And,
yeah, we've been investing a lot in career analytics, and hopefully you've seen that with some of the new capabilities coming out. A/B testing is definitely on our short list. A/B testing of the icons for sure, but also more broadly A/B testing for things within your experience. Yeah.
Great.
No dates associated with that yet, but it's on our short list. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask some questions about the UI editor. Currently, it's a little interesting to try and figure out how certain things work. It's sort of screw around and find out with all these aspect ratio constraints and stuff like that. Are there any plans for like visualizers? Like some guides showing you like where exactly your padding is, what kind of walls and boundaries you're hitting with your aspect ratio, stuff like that?
Our general approach right now is we want to improve the core system itself and add new capabilities, and then we'll work on the editing tool. It's like you need to build the things that you're going to edit before you build the editor. Certainly give us the feedback so that when we work on the tool, we can add features like that.
Absolutely, thank you.
As we implement the Signal API to adjust your UI for Roblox first-party UI, a lot of that visualization becomes really important, so I think it will come.
I think we have time for just one more.
Okay, super quick question for moderation and international. So yesterday you announced moderation for voice chat. So I was wondering, is it going to be English only at first or for other languages? How are you going to handle challenges like when words might be considered a swear word in one language but safe in another language?
Yeah, so we are going to roll out in English pretty shortly. but the other languages are on our roadmap, and we will roll them out over the next few quarters. In terms of how other languages will be supported, yes, I mean, we do need to get the training data from each of these other languages, and then we're going to use that to train our models so that it's very country specific, very language specific as well. So yeah, it's on our plans, not too far away.
I'm very sorry, I think we just about ran out of time, but some of us might be hanging around after this, so come up first. Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you.